From the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today, I'll be reviewing the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, released in 1978. And this is brought to you by my Patreon supporters as a special request. The synopsis is: space seeds drift to San Francisco, California, and grow duplicates of nearby sleeping humans from pods as they slowly replace the inhabitants of the city. Four friends fight for their life and their individuality. Now, Peter sent me a request to review this film. In it, he said, "There's been a fair few versions of the legendary Invasion of the Body Snatchers, originally released in 1956 and based on the science fiction novel by Jack Finney. I love the 1956 version, but my favorite is the 1978 one with Donald Sutherland, Brooke Adams, Veronica Cartwright, and Jeff Goldblum. Also, Leonard Nimoy. This film scared the crap out of me when I first saw it, and it unnerves me to this day with its discordant pulsing sound, eerie visuals, and creepy paranoia. Pretty grim movie. It's great though, and one of the best alien invasion stories out there if you ask me." So Peter, this review is for you. The story. The idea for the film began as a science fiction serial in Collier's magazine in 1954 before becoming a novel, The Body Snatchers, published in 1955, written by Jack Finney. Hollywood got the rights and produced the classic sci-fi film Invasion of the Body Snatchers in 1956. There have been several remakes, however, this is the first remake after 22 years. And get this, it could possibly be a sequel to that film, however you choose to decide. It has been labeled by many as one of the best remakes ever made, and I have to agree. Some would even say that this rivals the original movie, and to that I have to say that I enjoy them both equally for completely different reasons. During this review, I'll be referring to the book and the original movie for comparisons and explanations. The social climate in the 1970s had its problems, but it had become more inclusive, and there was an importance in individuality and expressing one's uniqueness. It was the heyday of the conspiracy theory as well, wherein there were many intellectual movies made upon the subject as more sophisticated, thought-provoking sci-fi. Director Philip Kaufman was a fan of the 1956 film, and intended for it to be a new envisioning that was a variation on a theme. W.D. Richter, who was a writer, director, and script doctor, took the screenplay to adapt the novel. One of the biggest changes in the film was the location from the small towns of Mill Valley in the book and Santa Mira in the original movie to the big city of San Francisco. There's also a change of the main protagonist, which assists the theory that the film is a sequel and not quite a remake. In the original film, he is Dr. Miles J. Bennell, and in this film, he is Health Inspector Matthew Bennell. In fact, all of the names of the main characters are different except for the last names in this story. Bennell's trusted colleague was completely renamed from Dr. Dan Kaufman to Dr. David Kibner. The first film was also interpreted as an allegory for socio-political history, like the assimilation of colonialism and the threat to democracy like America experienced during McCarthyism. This film really focuses more on the biological and psychological horror of this invasion on a more physical level. And it also involves the idea of conspiracy theories and the individual alienation of the loss of relationships. It's more interpersonal, and we get more fleshed out characters too. Interestingly enough, the audience isn't given more juicy information about the aliens or the invasion, and it compares to the simplicity of the original film, especially in dialogue. However, the biggest difference this time around is that the story is packed with so much visual and emotional storytelling, which fills in a lot of the questions moviegoers had about the original film. Now for the pacing. At an hour and 55 minutes, it can seem too long, and on the first viewing, a lot of the slow-moving and long scenes don't really seem to matter. However, on multiple viewings, you can see that every visual on screen is sculpting the details and coloring the tone of the story, filling it out with more realism and believability. As well, it's important to know that the film starts out slow and then ramps up. We don't get the full chase scene until about the 1 hour mark. And truthfully, it feels as if every moment works for me because of the detail involved every time I watch this film, and I seem to learn something new about the characters and the story. Making the film shorter might remove a lot of that texture that I find so wonderful about this film. Now the challenge. The challenge in the film are the invading aliens whose function of life is to survive. They were spores that drifted to planet Earth on solar winds and landed on plants. They matured into attractive, sweet-smelling flowers to attract their victims. While the victim is asleep, the pod grows until it gives birth to a duplicate of the nearest human being. Touch is not needed, but it seems to speed up the process. Every memory and physical attribute is duplicated. However, the human is completely consumed in this matter, and only a hairy, flaky husk remains. However, the biggest detriment to the pod people is that they do not duplicate the human's personality. This is the very reason why so many people find out what's happening and resist the process. There's also a misconception that the pods don't show any emotion, but they do. The emotions are subdued and cold, not warm and loving. They're very good at looking suspiciously at humans, I'll tell you that. And they actually appear to be seriously pissed off and horrified whenever one of their kind is killed and when they discover humans. As in the first movie, there's an implication that the humans are just transferred into the new bodies. One of the pod people, Dr. David Kibner, tells us that subjects would be born again into an untroubled world, free of anxiety, fear, and hate. They use this tactic to subdue humans. I think it actually gives us a window into the aliens' psychology. I think that the aliens don't see themselves as actually killing humans because they think that they're helping humans to evolve. But let's just face it, they're actually just killing humans, and they're really aggressive about eradicating them completely. So what makes the pod people scary is that they get you in your sleep. Okay? This is a very vulnerable time during the sleeping process, and we all have to do it. It reminds me of the thrill of seeing Nightmare on Elm Street released in 1984 for the very first time. I just spent the whole time yelling at the screen, "Don't go to sleep!" I mean, the ultimate boogie monster always gets you in your sleep. Now for the empathy. The empathy for me was actually stronger for me in the first film. I really attached myself to the character of Miles Bonnell and how much he was so traumatized by the end of the film. And he comes from a very small town where he knows everyone, and every single person in the town is basically taken over by the pod people. That means they're all dead. All the people he's grown up with and loved, they're gone. So he is totally flipped out and freaked out by the end, and I feel like I understood that. I still enjoyed the characters in this movie, and there was way more character development, as I mentioned before. The film starts out with Elizabeth Driscoll bringing home a pod flower and then realizing that her boyfriend has transformed the next morning. Her instinct is to tell her colleague and best friend Matthew Bonnell. Matthew acts as the audience for most of the film, trying to apply real-world logic to the occurrences in the film. His first instinct is to take Elizabeth to his trusted friend David Kibner, and it never occurs to him or anyone else that David could be a pod person. Matthew's fundamental belief is that the government, authority, public officials, and doctors can help him. So he exhausts all the ways to logically handle this situation. A great example of this is that when he witnesses a possible death that happens, he says, the policeman will help. And we all would assume that, right? And he's often seen on the phone throughout the film calling some sort of authority and basically tipping off the pods exactly where he is and what he's up to. And it's only by the end that he realizes that there is no one he can turn to of authority. The anchor for him in this film is his love for Elizabeth. They're friends, but you see that he's crazy about her and he's just really just trying to help her figure this out. When faced with the end of the world as they know it, they sweetly show their love for each other. And I love that the way that it's done very subtly, and we don't get this like passionate love scene in the middle of everything. We just get a simple kiss and a lot of hugging. And I thought that was very nice because they're kind of consoling each other after all that they've lost. Now the adventure continues with the two getting together with a friend of theirs, Jack, who is a poet that makes a living as a bathhouse owner. He starts out the film very, very arrogant and entitled and very unlikable, to be honest. However, there is more to it when we see that he's a struggling artist trying to break out of his day job and into the life that he wants. Once the world changes, he actually makes a very heroic move by sacrificing himself in order to save everyone else. His character is redeemed. Unfortunately, he is turned into a pod, but and then he dies. But it's still, he still tried. When he was himself, he still was trying to do the right thing. His wife, Nancy Belichick, is, in my opinion, the one person in the film that is equipped for this invasion. She is the one who calls out Dr. David Kibner for intentionally trying to make the group think that they're going crazy. She pretty much figures out that the pod flowers are from space. She's the only person that didn't fall asleep at Matthew's apartment, and she is the one who saves them all from being consumed. Then she is the one to discover that you can walk among the pods if you don't show emotion. And I thought it was ironic that she is one of the most emotionally expressive characters in the group. She doesn't have a lot of screen time, and we don't get to see much from her point of view, but she is the closest thing to a real hero that we've got in the film. And I love that character, to be very, very honest with you. Now the technical aspects. Okay guys, I'm about to get really super nerdy on you. The technical aspects is where the film really excels, and much of it holds true over time. Yes, there are some distinctive things about the film that are dated, such as the city and the fashions of the day. However, the look of the film and the special effects and the edit excellently serves the story and transcends time. It's a piece of art, in my opinion. It was a bold move to depict the spaceboards on their last conquered world, making a flight to the cosmos. Viscous material was bought for $12 from an art store, dropped into solutions, and the film was reversed. This was brilliant because it was just the visual storytelling that we needed to see and understand how this all began. It's such a simple workaround, but it has a wonderful payoff to it. Seeing the gelatinous material root into the leaves of other plants was such a wonderful and authentic special effect because it looked so amazing. The rooftop scene is a very memorable scene, meant to mimic the powerful greenhouse scene in the original movie. This is when Matthew falls asleep in his apartment and the pod closest to him grows into maturity with his likeness. As well, there are 2 more pods developing nearby. I really love that such an awesome scene from the original movie rose to the challenge of not only being visually stunning, but even superseding the horror as the revolting layout of bodies writhe and tremble and moan. Oh, it was fantastic. The pod doubles in their unfinished stage were highly disturbing, covered in visible veins, slime, and hair. Yuck! They were truly gross, and that reaction helps us to understand how horrible it is to see these things. They really upped the game on these creature effects this time. In his book, Danse Macabre, Stephen King wrote, "There's a moment in that film which is repulsively horrible. It comes when Donald Sutherland uses a rake to smash in the face of a mostly formed pod. This person's face breaks with a sickening ease like a rotted piece of fruit and lets out an explosion of the most realistic stage blood that I've ever seen in a color film." Some critics say that it's too grotesque, and usually I'm not a fan of body horror, but in this case, wrapped in such a thought-provoking story, I found it fascinating. And guess what? I craved more. And one thing that added to the special effects was the sound production by Ben Burtt, who also worked on Star Wars. I mean, this guy is the man when it comes to creating unique sounds. He used the heartbeat from his pregnant wife's ultrasound to create an eerie sound effect. The natural atmospheric sounds, or what's called diegetic sounds, that both the audience and the characters can hear in the film really makes the audience feel as if we are actually there. It just fills out every conceivable space for storytelling. One of the most horrific sounds were the screams of pod people. This was a new element added to this version of the film. The screams were actually manipulated pig squeals mixed with other sounds, which were blood-curdling and like nails on a chalkboard. It really helped to ramp up the terror when a pod person uses it to alert their comrades that a human is nearby. The cinematography bears special mention because the camera takes so many unconventional angles and lenses to get a very unique style. Cinematographer Michael Chapman worked with Philip Kaufman to get a very beautiful film noir look using light and shadow to support the mysterious element of the film. Not only that, I have to say that the shots taken of the city of San Francisco were breathtaking, gritty, grungy, and very textured. I loved it. I also think it bears mentioning that Michael played the creepy janitor in the film. We got 2 incredibly slow-moving scenes that were just the camera moving down the hallway to build the next beat. It gives us the sense that the mundane activities were about to be changed. And I love that play with the camera. You know, again, I'll use the word artistic. It's art. And this movie really feels like art. There are scenes with the camera seeing the world from a cracked car window because our characters can only see fragments of the world that they're in. And then there's another scene where the characters are facing a distorted mirror, telling us that they're not really seeing the truth of their reality. Just little things like that. Now, one scene that was very uniquely shot was when Matthew was trying to get help by calling government officials, and the scene was transformed into a phone calling montage that started off in his office and then moved to a phone booth in the streets of San Francisco. Again, more beautiful art. I adored the details that was put into Matthew's office. This is the kind of staging that really helps the place really feel lived in, and I adored the way it's very intimately shot to show us how small his world is, even though he's in a big city. Denny Zetlin, an American jazz pianist and composer, scored the film, and it was his only venture into film scoring. Listening to the score, there's so many moments that had a very nostalgic, classic orchestral horror feel. Some of the stuff that you would probably have heard in the early 50s. But there's also the use of synthesizers to insert a little oddity that feels very alien and spooky and scary. The opening scene is a great example of that. So many different audible styles of music and sound effects that happened in that sequence. There were even some moments when it felt like the score for Forbidden Planet, released in 1956. But the music is so subtle at times, you hardly recognize that it's actually guiding your emotions. Near the end, Amazing Grace plays as we see the world through the eyes of the pod version of Matthew. Amazing Grace is a song typically played at funerals, and I felt it was signaling the death of Matthew's ego self. Matthew, as all of the other pod people, have been led to see the quote-unquote light, becoming a pod person, and life is theoretically quote-unquote better without those pesky human emotions. Now for the performances. I kid you not, every single performance was superb. Even the extras in this movie were amazing, immersing you into a very conspiratory world. I have watched this film so many times, looking to find all the little details, and that was one that I found very interesting. Each actor played their role with sincerity and authenticity from their point of view. Philip Kaufman told his actors to use facial expressions between dialogue to add humanity and compassion to the characters. It worked brilliantly. As well, many of the characters talk over each other. It's a little chaotic when that happens, but it works to help plump up the urgency of their motivations. Donald Sutherland plays the part of Matthew Bonnell as a practical man with a passionate concern for others. He doesn't try to repeat or imitate the performance of Kevin McCarthy, who played Miles Bonnell in the original. Donald puts his own spin on it by being a little bit more practical and even a bit more naive. There's an innocence that he imparts upon the character, and I think that character was meant to be even less like Kevin by having Donald in a curly hairstyle that would have his hair set in pink rollers every day. He had an outstanding dedication to the role, and even at one point performing his own stunts at the pod factory without a harness or nets. Brooke Adams played Elizabeth Driscoll. Her performance was an important piece of the puzzle for making this movie believable. Her eyes emote so much expression, ranging from curiosity, trust, love, and fear. The scene when Elizabeth meets Matthew by the elevator, I just think that her eyes are just filled with fire. They're so animated, and there's so much emotion in there. When her character becomes a pod, the vacancy in her eyes are just chilling. Donald and Brooke had to do a lot of the running, and Brooke did it all in heels, if you can believe that. It's incredible to watch. You look at that movie, and you can see her booking as fast as she can in those high heels, keeping up with Donald the whole time. On the set, the two had a playful race during one of the chase scenes. They continued after the director yelled cut. And can you believe this? Brooke won that race. Dr. Kibner was played by Leonard Nimoy to branch out from his famous role as Spock on the Star Trek TV show. He wanted to make his character stand out, so he opted to wear a strange half glove. I think casting him as Dr. Kibner was a great move because initially it was hard to determine if he was a pod or not. Veronica Cartwright played Nancy Belichick, and wow, I just love her in this. Veronica is very well known for playing characters that get hysterical in films, such as in Alien in 1979 and The Witches of Eastwick in 1987. I can't say how much I loved her in this. She's amazing. Without her over-the-top freak out at the end, the moment would have not have had the same impact or the same lasting effect. And some would say that it was overacted. However, I react the very same way anytime I see a spider, okay? And I'm not kidding. Even seeing a web is enough to freak me out and keep me up all night, okay? So, you know, her character under the circumstances has every right to freak out, and I felt she nailed it. Veronica was not told that Sutherland's character became a pod, so her reaction was improvised and captured on the spot. It was fantastic, and I just wanted to stand up and slow clap during that scene. It was just pure awesomeness. Veronica Cartwright also appeared in the remake made in 2007. Jeff Goldblum plays Jack Belichick, using the very typical rambling energy he puts into all of his characters. In this film, his character isn't as charming as his other characters, unfortunately. He plays Jack a little bit immature and intellectually unheard. And there's a sadness and a vulnerability to the character, and he's just the guy to put that range in that performance. And the connection that he has with Veronica Cartwright playing his wife is very touching, and it's about two people who really need each other and look out for each other. Kevin McCarthy makes a powerful cameo in the film and is credited as the running man. There's no indication that he is Dr. Miles Bennell, but there's no indication that he isn't. His appearance proposes the idea that Miles has been running from town to town trying to spread the word about the invasion that's happening for the last 22 years. And this is just yet another clue that the events of the movie is in a world that has already had a visit by the aliens. The director of the 1956 original film, Don Segal, made a cameo in the film as a pod taxi driver. And you know what? He has a very small role, but I absolutely loved his little character. And there was a palpable tension in the moment. And one of the reasons for that was quite terrifying, actually. Don had very limited vision, and he was actually driving in the scene, so the actors were very worried for their safety. Other cameos include Philip Kaufman, and Robert Duvall played the priest on the swing. The wish list. So if you thought I got nerdy when I came to the technical aspects, I'm about to get even more nerdy, if there's even such a thing. I just love this film. I really don't know if you could really change this film and make it better. However, I do have some thoughts about what's missing from the film, because there's a lot that's missing. Yeah, because I don't think you can really add more to this film without it being ridiculously long. And it could lose a lot of the impact of the pacing that it already has. And with that said, I really wanted to say that this film just made me more interested in learning more details about the aliens that we didn't get in either of the two movies. In this story, why are the pod people so obsessed with hunting down all of the humans? Why can't they figure out a way of coexisting with mankind in secret? And perhaps they have for 22 years. There are subtle clues that the first people we see on screen in the opening of the film are actually pod people, making this either a second wave or one of several waves of a calculated invasion. For instance, there's a lady looking out of a window during the arrival, and a school teacher urges her students to take home the alien flower to their parents. The priest on the swing could be a pod person as well. He's on the swing, but he has no emotions while he's doing it. He's not enjoying it at all, but he may just be doing it because he has the memories of the priest that he copied and he's just doing it because it's something that the priest always does. The invasion itself seems so unsustainable. If the aliens are only interested in surviving, why are they exhausting everything instead of harvesting the planet? Is it that the alien life form is so simple that it's not really that intelligent? I mean, that's a possibility. I'm also curious why the pod people become so angry at seeing humans by the end. I wish that was explained. I don't know, it just seems kind of like a strange thing. I've always wanted to know, why are they so angry? Why are the pod people so angry? Then there's the duplication process. It's an interesting thing as well. The book explains pods choose to duplicate humans because they are more resourceful in aiding the invasion. I would have loved to have learned more about this process and how they're able to duplicate things without taking a sample of DNA. The hairy tendrils of the pods don't always touch the people that they copy. How do they copy memories and scars? Are the copies biologically human with human organs, or just a shell that looks human? Why does sleeping activate the process? I really would like to know if there's like some kind of psychic way they're doing all of this. And that could be a really good explanation for it. The film actually shows that the aliens can communicate with each other without speaking sometimes. And it could be that it's easier to feed on the nearest conscious being at rest than the nearest cup or the nearest chair. I also thought it would have been really cool if they were able to capture one of the pod people for a short time and question them and learn about the pod people and their invasion, what they plan on doing, and so forth. And I'd also love to know more about how the pod people mobilize each other. Do they in fact have a hive mind? And if so, who is the keeper of their accumulated knowledge, and how is this distributed? Can a pod person be disconnected from the hive? I don't think this could be, I don't think something like this could be done in one film without making a huge mess of things. And I think it would be super duper cool if it was a very well produced TV series or mini series. There's endless possibilities. I mean, so much more story to tell here, One actual wish for this film is that I wish that the film kept some kind of consistency with the character of David Kibner, or at least give us an idea when he became a pod. When we first meet him at the book party, he exhibits many emotions. However, a few hours later, he's definitely more of a dry character up until the end. And so I assume that he went home after the book party, took a nap, and the pod replacement is the one who shows up at Belichick's bathhouse. However, he still exhibits plenty of emotions, and I wish that we were given the reasons why. Is it because he's a psychologist that he's able to manipulate his response, whereas the other pods can't? I mean, I'm really reaching so much for this one, but it's a possibility, and I'm willing to believe it in order to have the movie be perfect in my brain. Now, to move on to enjoyment. The ending of the film is a very iconic moment in cinema, and it turns out that the story behind it is that in the original film, Don Segal wanted a darker ending, but the studio shut that idea down firmly. However, before filming, Segal, Kevin McCarthy, and Philip Kaufman got together and talked about this bombshell of an ending, which was a beautiful collaboration with a phenomenal outcome. The studio executives first learned of it when a cut was screened for them at George Lucas's house. the night after the movie's release, pods were anonymously placed all over Los Angeles, which freaked out the locals. It opened to decent reviews and a decent box office, but it accrued more acclaim over time. And for me, this is a movie I saw at the movies when it came out, and it really didn't wow me. I was only 7 or 8, so maybe it was just way over my head for me to really fully appreciate. I did like it though, and after revisiting it over the years, I've just come to appreciate it so much more, and it grows with each view. In my opinion, this is a beautiful piece of art, and it offers us a simple tale that is told so much more visually. My rating is a 9.1. Well, that sums up my review. I hoped you liked it. If you did, I've got over 100 of these videos, so go on and browse the channel to see more reviews from me just like this. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and hit the bell icon to be the very first to get notified of my next video. This is Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers. I'm off to my next review.